Imagine waking up surrounded by top-tier waifus, with a gorgeous dark-haired girl asking if you're ready, and an absolutely adorable maid boldly declaring that she won't let you sleep tonight. Sounds like the ultimate isekai dream, right? Well, for our boy here, he's absolutely terrified, sweating bullets, and desperately wondering what the heck is going to happen to him. But hold your horses, because to understand how our guy ended up in this glorious yet totally overwhelming predicament, we gotta rewind the clock a bit. Before the magic and the maids, his reality was just a completely white ceiling in a sterile white hospital room. For 16 agonizing years, that was his entire world. Confined to a bed, unable to go to school or make a single offline friend, his body was failing him. As his heart monitor starts to flatline and the panicked shouts of doctors desperately trying to save him fade into the background, he accepts his fate. He thanks his family for everything, feeling like he has no real memories and no regrets as his life ends. But wait, there is one tiny, nerdy regret left. His absolute only escape from that miserable white room was a mega-popular online RPG called The 5 Great Nights of Irene. For a kid whose real body couldn't even move, grinding in that virtual world was literally his perfect reason to live. As the darkness takes over, his final heartbreaking wish is just to play that game one more time. I mean, nobody wants to log off permanently without finishing their daily quests, right? Well, it seems the universe, or maybe the server admins, heard his plea because he suddenly gasps awake. Only, he isn't staring at a hospital ceiling anymore. He's standing in the middle of a stupidly lavish chandelier-lit bedroom. Confused, he stumbles over to a massive fancy mirror and immediately lets out a horror movie scream. "Who the heck are you?" His freakout scares the absolute living daylights out of a cute little maid who comes rushing in, tearfully stammering that her name is Moran. But our guy isn't yelling at her. He's pointing at his own reflection in pure panic, begging to know who he is. Moran, probably thinking her boss has finally lost his marbles, politely informs him that he is none other than Lord Diabolo Visconti. And that name hits him harder than a standard isekai truck. Diabolo? He instantly remembers the game's lore. Diabolo Visconti isn't the hero. He's a notoriously hated, arrogant noble. Flashbacks flood his mind of this villainous scumbag with creepy shark teeth, ruthlessly screaming at and abusing his servants, specifically calling this poor maid useless while she cries and apologizes. Our guy looks at his own hands in absolute disbelief. His dying wish was to play the game again, but of all the overpowered characters or lucky villagers, he just had to be reincarnated into the body of the biggest supervillain in the entire game. As he clutches his head in despair, cursing his terrible gacha luck, the timid little maid cautiously asks if he's feeling sick. He looks up at Moran, and the final realization drops. This shaking, terrified girl isn't just some random NPC. She is literally one of the main heroines of the game. You see, to understand why our guy is currently hyperventilating at the sight of a cute maid in a surgical mask, we have to look at the game's lore. In the original story, Moran is a frail girl suffering from severe asthma, but the original Diabolo was an absolute menace who overworked and verbally abused her every single day, even yelling at her for coughing because he didn't want to catch her useless germs. But karma in video games hits hard, because eventually the game's actual protagonist, Fort, comes along and uses holy magic to cure her illness. And what happens next? Moran awakens her hidden, overpowered fire magic and literally roasts Diabolo to a crisp. Snap back to reality, and Moran suddenly drops a box on the floor. She instantly cowers in absolute terror, practically begging for forgiveness and expecting a beating, while our reincarnated guy is just sweating buckets, gently asking if she's okay while internally screaming that this girl is definitely going to incinerate him at this rate. Realizing he is surrounded by walking death traps, his brain goes into overdrive and he remembers that there is actually another main heroine in the game who also has a route that ends with his gruesome murder. In a sheer panic, he tells Moran to leave the mess and go rest, before awkwardly screaming at her to call him a taxi. After she confusedly summons a horse-drawn carriage because, fantasy world, he absolutely books it to a massive, imposing estate that screams final boss area. As he marches up to the gates, he admits to himself that out of all the ways Diabolo can die in the game, this place holds the absolute biggest death flag of them all. He demands the gatekeeper let him see Lady Ciel, but the guard just hits him with a serious side-eye, asking if our guy has completely forgotten what he did to the young lady. Right on cue, a gorgeous girl with dark hair is wheeled out of the estate by her maid. Yep, a wheelchair. Our guy stares in horror as he remembers the absolute greatest sin the original Diabolo committed. CL Deepwindow is the daughter of a count and Diabolo's literal fiancé, and this absolute trash-tier villain of a noble pushed her straight off a cliff. CL's maid glares daggers at him, bluntly stating that the young lady never wants to see his face again and telling him to get lost. Desperate to change his fate, our guy begs CL to just hear him out one time, but CL won't even look at him. Instead, her maid casually relays a message from her master, stating that if CL ever gets the chance to see him again, she will murder him without fail. Absolutely thoroughly rejected and terrified for his life, our guy takes his medieval Uber back to his own estate. A very confused Maran greets him at the gate, politely welcoming him back and telling him to get some rest since it's late. Completely drained, he slumps onto his lavish bed, clutching his head as the heavy reality of his situation finally sets in. He really did die in his hospital bed. He really was reincarnated into the body of the most hated scumbag in gaming history, and once again, the imminent threat of death is aggressively speedrunning its way right toward him. Realizing that at this rate the heroines he's traumatized are absolutely 100% going to murder him, our guy decides to try a classic isekai trope. He reaches out his hand and shouts, "Status open!" And what do you know, a holographic game menu actually pops up right in front of him. But looking at his stats is just pure depression. Aside from being level 8, his official in-game title is literally Hated Heir, Enemy of Nobles and Servants. Talk about a PR nightmare. But wait, because our boy here is a hardcore gamer who fully completed this RPG in his past life, his big brain starts churning. He knows that Diabolo's magic affinity is darkness, which is super overpowered for dealing damage but essentially useless for healing. However, he remembers a massive exploit. If he grinds hard enough and raises the liberation level of his darkness attribute, he can actually learn healing magic. Suddenly, the despair turns into a maniacal, villainous laugh. He realizes that while reincarnating into the most hated guy on the server sucks, he finally has what he never had in his past life, a perfectly healthy body. Plus, he's filthy rich. He pieces together the ultimate survival strategy. The original game's plot involves the protagonist seeing the heroines suffer, teaming up with them, and judging Diabolo. So, the solution is simple. He just has to cure the heroine's illnesses himself before the protagonist even shows up to steal the spotlight. Embracing his new identity, he vows that he won't just save his own skin. He's going to genuinely fix this mess. Cut to the next morning, and he's already putting his plan into action. He bumps into Maran and awkwardly tries to thank her, which completely flusters the poor maid since she's used to getting yelled at. But he knows words aren't enough. He has Maran gather the entire household staff in the great dining hall. As he walks in and greets them, the entire army of maids and butlers physically recoil in sheer terror. Sweating nervously, our guy realizes they are so traumatized that avoiding the condemnation route is going to take a miracle. He takes a deep breath and gives a public apology, promising that because of his past immaturity, he caused them hardship, but from now on, he will never yell at them or hit them. And then he starts listing out his promises. No more 24-hour shifts, no more forcing them to eat minced monster meat, and no more abandoning them in magical beast nests. Internally, our guy is absolutely screaming, realizing that the original Diabolo wasn't just a jerk, he was a literal cartoon supervillain. Just then, the head butler, Raum, steps up, looking like he's ready to throw hands. Diabolo immediately recognizes him as Maran's father. He knows the lore. On the surface, Raum is a loyal servant, but deep down, he despises Diabolo for abusing his daughter, and is canonically fated to join the protagonist's rebellion later. Trying to buy his loyalty, Diabolo promises to keep their salaries the same while reducing their workload, and then completely goes off script by offering to beg his father to increase everyone's wages 5-fold. But Raum's icy glare doesn't waver. Realizing that money isn't going to erase years of abuse, Diabolo decides to prove his sincerity through actions. In a world where nobles treat commoners like dirt, Diabolo suddenly bends at the waist and drops into a deep, respectful bow right in front of his servants. The entire room gasps in absolute shock. A master bowing to his staff is practically illegal in noble society. With his head held low, Diabolo screams out a powerful declaration. For now, This is all I can do, but I will change. Everyone, watch me." And just like that, the biggest villain in the game officially begins his redemption arc. So, after dropping the wildest apology in noble history, our guy heads out to face his next massive hurdle, his own father. Miran, being the sweet maid she is, insists on tagging along, which is probably a good thing because Diabolo remembers that his dad, the Duke, was so utterly sick of his wicked son's garbage behavior that he literally banished him to a separate estate. Talk about serious daddy issues. When they walk into the Duke's lavish office, Grande Visconti doesn't even look up before hitting him with a freezing cold. "Begone! You are in the way." Ouch. After some desperate pleading, the wildly intimidating Duke gives him exactly 3 minutes to speak his piece. Sweating under his father's terrifying glare, which honestly looks way more badass in person than it did on a screen, Diabolo immediately blurts out his request to multiply the servants' wages by 5. The Duke just stares at him like he's an absolute idiot, asking why he's wasting his 3 minutes on nonsense. When Diabolo awkwardly tries to explain it's his way of atoning for his past behavior, his dad violently shuts him down, utterly roasting him by asking why he's crying to his daddy for money instead of fixing his own messes. Just as Diabolo realizes this father-son relationship is way worse than he thought, Miran clutch saves the day. The timid maid bravely steps up to the terrifying Duke and actually vouches for Diabolo, explaining how he bowed his head to the staff and is genuinely striving to be a better person. Taking the cue, Diabolo drops his pride, admits he's an immature kid who can't do anything on his own right now, and drops into another deep bow, begging for a chance to become a man who can actually protect the Visconti family and their servants. The Duke, clearly not buying empty promises about a future that hasn't happened yet, gives him a strict ultimatum. With the Irene Holy Knight Academy entrance exams rapidly approaching, he tells Diabolo to physically prove he's changed before enrollment. Seeing his golden opportunity, our guy confidently demands proper magical training. The Duke agrees, promising to personally set up the training grounds and warning his son not to chicken out. Fast forward a bit, and Diabolo is standing in front of a creepy, pitch-black cave nestled right on their estate property. But he's not scared at all. He's completely hyped. His hardcore gamer brain recognizes this spot immediately as the Cave of Supergrowth, a literal post-game hidden area where physical exhaustion is multiplied by 5, but the EXP gain is also boosted a massive 5-fold. As Marin nervously tells him not to overexert himself, he smiles and promises to work hard and master healing magic. Confused, Miran tilts her head and asks the obvious question. Since his magic attribute is strictly darkness, shouldn't learning light-based healing magic be completely impossible? And why go through all this literal torture to learn it anyway? Diabolo turns to her, hits her with the softest, most genuine look ever, and simply says, "To cure your illness." Cue the massive critical hit to Miran's heart. The poor girl instantly turns beet red, clutches her chest, and practically short-circuits from the sheer, unexpected riz, totally ignoring the ominous, terrifying monster screeches echoing from the dark cave right behind them. Just when our boy is busy smooth-talking his maid, their sweet little moment is violently shattered by a high-pitched, menacing giggle from above. Floating in the air is a horned, elf-eared girl who looks like she walked straight out of a gothic fantasy, and she casually asks if she should blow them both to pieces for being too flirty. Diabolo's heart completely stops because his gamer brain instantly recognizes this cute but deadly threat as Alcor, the Witch of Death, one of the absolute hardest hidden post-game final bosses from the original RPG. He internally panics, thinking he's about to get brutally murdered before his school enrollment arc even begins. But instead of vaporizing him, Alcor lands and proudly declares that from today on, she is going to be his personal magic tutor. When Diabolo tries to question why a literal final boss is teaching a scrub noble, she physically shuts him up with her staff, gets way too close to his face with a terrifyingly blank stare, and asks if he has a death wish. After giving him a massive heart attack, she suddenly giggles, saying she was just kidding, before explaining that his dad hired her with very specific instructions to train him so hard that he nearly dies. She casually warns him that if he actually does kick the bucket during training, he isn't allowed to complain, which makes Diabolo sweat drop because, well, dead people usually can't complain anyway. Alcor then asks if he has a goal, since his magic attribute is the same as her own, and Diabolo confidently states that he aims to reach Darkness Liberation level 10. Both Alcor and Moran are completely dumbfounded by his stupidity, with Alcor pointing out that even she, a legendary witch, is only level 9. But Diabolo knows that if he doesn't hit level 10 and learn healing magic, he is destined to get slaughtered by the Heroines. Seeing his crazy determination, Alcor smirks and accepts the challenge, cackling that she's going to train him until he literally dies. And so, the hellish training regime begins. It starts with basic physical conditioning, which Alcor takes to a ridiculous extreme, demanding 100 laps around the lake, 1,000 push-ups, and 1,000 sit-ups. Diabolo is absolutely dying, gasping and asking if she accidentally added an extra 0 to all the numbers, but deep down, our former sickly protagonist is actually kind of happy to finally have a body that can move and sweat. Next up is Magic Study, where Alcor queued up by wearing glasses and posing as a proper teacher, but Diabolo immediately raises his hand to complain that the textbook doesn't have any healing magic. Alcor just hits him with a sneaky, mischievous grin, and that's when the real nightmare starts. 3 weeks into training, Alcor's lesson plan apparently turns into straight-up attempted murder. She starts dropping massive boulders on him, blasting him with dark magic while he's trying to do sit-ups, and digging giant cartoonish pitfall traps on his running routes. To make things even worse, a high-level monster randomly spawns and chases him for his life while his master just happily stands by, saying she didn't summon it, but tells him to have fun anyway. Talk about toxic teaching methods. But fast forward a bit, and as the academy enrollment date draws near, Moran runs out to the training grounds to deliver their lunch. Alcor happily calls for a break, and Diabolo slumps over to catch his breath, popping open his status screen to check his progress. And oh my god, his stats are absolutely cracked. In just a few weeks of near-death experiences, his HP has skyrocketed to a casual 3 million, his Darkness Liberation level has reached a godlike level 9, and his titles have hilariously updated to Extremely Serious Young Lord, Brother Who Raises Wages, and Heavy Love. He proudly points at his holographic screen and brags to Moran, whose jaw completely hits the floor when she sees he reached level 9 in less than a month. Our boy is officially speedrunning his way to becoming an absolute beast, and his hard work is finally paying off. But with the academy entrance exams just around the corner, his real fight to survive is only just beginning. Diabolo casually explains to Moran that in this world, the rules of magic are simple. Darkness magic is strictly for attacking, and holy magic is for healing. However, he reveals a massive exploit. If a dark user somehow achieves the legendary Liberation level 10, they can actually bypass the system's limits and learn to heal. Marin looks at him in pure awe, realizing he went through all this literal torture just to cure her. But while they are having this sweet little moment, Alcor's eyes suddenly go dark under the brim of her hat. Without warning, the lowly witch dashes backward, and the ground completely explodes behind Diabolo as a massive, terrifying rock golem bursts out of the earth. As Marin screams in terror, Alcor coldly states that this isn't just some random mob, it's a custom-made golem, and since reaching level 10 is theoretically impossible through normal training, Diabolo is going to have to forcefully unlock it by staring straight into the abyss of death. Realizing his crazy teacher is actually trying to kill him again, Diabolo heroically yells at Moran to get back before spending the next few minutes running for his absolute life, screaming at the top of his lungs that he is definitely going to die while desperately dodging the golem's massive, earth-shattering fists. Poor Moran is crying and begging Alcor to stop the training, but the witch just smirks and tells the maid to look closely. Despite Diabolo internally panicking about having 0 actual combat experience, his insanely grinded stats are automatically kicking in, allowing his body to instinctively dodge every single lethal blow. Deciding to push him over the very final edge, Alcor screams at him to stop running and fight back, or else he will actually die. Just as the golem's giant fist shadows over him, time seems to slow down for our boy. Flashbacks of his miserable past life hit him hard. The sterile hospital room, the IV drips, the absolute helplessness of fading away in a bed. The sheer trauma of his past death ignites a furious, desperate spark in his soul. He absolutely refuses to die twice. Screaming that he won't let this be the end, he clenches his fist as a massive aura of pitch-black magic violently engulfs his arm. With a mighty roar, he steps into the attack and unleashes a devastating One-Punch Man-style dark magic strike that completely obliterates the giant golem into a million pieces. A massive shockwave of energy explodes outward, clearing the dust and leaving both Alcor and Moran standing there in absolute stunned silence. Panting, sweating, and covered in dirt, our boy catches his breath, smirks, and summons his status screen. Boom! He is now level 45. His titles have hilariously updated to include Amazing Hard Worker and Deeply Devoted Lover, and right there, shining brightly on the holographic menu, is Darkness Liberation level 10. He actually did the impossible. Alcor looks at him with a genuine proud smile, finally acknowledging him by his actual name instead of just calling him a brat. Turning his back to the rubble and looking toward the future, Diabolo clenches his fist with a newfound, unshakable resolve. The tutorial is officially over. He has finally obtained the power to fight his doomed fate. The condemnation flags, the terrible endings, the original protagonist, none of it matters anymore, because he vows right then and there that, without fail, he is going to use his new, hard-earned healing magic to save every single one of them. Meanwhile, back at the Deep Window estate, Ciel is staring blankly out the window from her wheelchair, a bitter look on her face. Her maid asks if she's okay, and Ciel coldly replies that she knew Diabolo wouldn't bother coming back to visit her, stating that people never really change. The physical pain from that horrible day when he pushed her is forever engraved in her body, but the emotional scars in her heart run even deeper. Honestly, you can't really blame her for being the ultimate death flag. But let's cut back to our boy Diabolo, who is about to prove her completely wrong. Having just unlocked the impossible Darkness Liberation level 10, he stands proudly in the training field, ready to test out his brand new skill. Alcor watches with genuine curiosity, reminding him that dark magic is strictly meant for destruction. Ignoring the conventional rules of the world, Diabolo raises his hands, focuses his aura, and confidently casts Dark Healing right on himself. Instantly, a massive pulse of dark energy erupts, but instead of hurting him, the magic washes over his battered body like a warm, soothing bath. All his cuts, bruises, and utter exhaustion completely vanish, leaving him overflowing with energy. He playfully slaps his own behind, declaring that his proud, peach-shaped butt, which had gone completely numb from Alcor targeting it during training, has been fully restored. But while he's busy celebrating his flawless glutes, he notices Moran is missing. Alcor calmly explains that the poor maid ran all the way back to the mansion in a complete panic to fetch medical supplies for his injuries. Realizing she must be worried sick, Diabolo absolutely books it back to the estate. As he runs down the lavish hallway, he spots Moran and her father, Raum, the head butler. But instead of a happy reunion, things look incredibly tense. Raum is glaring at Diabolo with pure hatred, demanding to know what exactly he and his daughter are doing. Moran, with stars in her eyes, proudly declares that Lord Diabolo has been training to the brink of death every single day just to cure her illness. This confession absolutely shatters Raum's stoic butler persona. He steps protectively in front of his daughter, aggressively telling Diabolo to leave Moran alone. Diabolo is completely taken aback, asking why Raum would say such a thing after he worked so hard. With tears of desperation in his eyes, Raum completely breaks character, screaming that Moran is everything to him. He reveals that his wife died early, and he raised his daughter desperately all by himself. The only reason he endured Diabolo's past abuse and even bowed his head to him was strictly for Moran's future. He fiercely states that no doctor has ever been able to cure her illness, so there is absolutely no way a spoiled, cruel kid like Diabolo can do it. Believing that Diabolo's dark magic will only make her condition worse or kill her, Raum unleashes a terrifying, murderous aura, declaring that if Diabolo tries to harm his daughter any further, he is fully prepared to kill him and die together right here, right now. Diabolo is sweating bullets, internally screaming about how things escalated to a literal death threat so quickly. But the intense, murderous pressure from Raum suddenly triggers something catastrophic. Moran, overwhelmed by the stress and fear of seeing her beloved father and her master about to kill each other, suddenly bursts into tears and begs them to stop. Instantly, a massive, uncontrollable torrent of pure, blazing fire magic erupts from her body, engulfing the entire hallway. Diabolo panics, realizing that the extreme emotional stress is causing Moran to prematurely awaken her overpowered hidden magic, the exact same magic she uses to burn him to a crisp in the bad ending. Raum, completely shocked by the sudden inferno, violently winces and clutches his back in pain. Seeing an opening to de-escalate the situation, Diabolo realizes Raum isn't actually injured by the fire, but rather suffering from a severe case of frozen shoulder due to old age and stress. Without hesitating, Diabolo steps right through the flames, places his hand squarely on Raum's stiff back, and casts Dark Healing. The dark energy pulses, and suddenly, the terrifying, battle-hardened head butler lets out an incredibly loud, absurdly dramatic, and wildly inappropriate groan of pure ecstasy as his chronic back pain is instantly cured. He strikes a fabulous pose, totally flustered and confused, asking what on earth that incredible feeling was, while Diabolo and Moran just stare at him in absolute, uncomfortable silence. Well, that's one way to stop a family feud. Still completely flustered, Raum grabs his shoulder and stammers, asking if this absurdly pleasant sensation is actually the recovery magic of the darkness attribute, and more importantly, if it can really heal Marin too. With absolute confidence, Diabolo places a hand on his chest and declares that he will definitely cure her, solemnly telling Raum that he learned this magic specifically for that purpose. Realizing that his master literally went to hell and back just to save a servant, Raum's entire demeanor shifts. He respectfully steps back, completely dropping his hostility, and softly says, "I leave my daughter in your hands." Taking a deep breath, Diabolo steps up to Moran, reaches out his hand, and firmly casts Dark Healing. The dark energy washes over the cute maid, and instantly she lets out an extremely loud, squeaky, and completely embarrassing moan, exactly like her dad did. Diabolo immediately panics and starts sweating profusely, internally screaming, "What is this? Is this what happens when you use it on others?" And desperately hoping no one takes this out of context. Moran, however, is too busy feeling absolutely amazing. She realizes she's completely cured and immediately takes off running down the hall at full speed. Raum instinctively yells for her to wait, terrified that running will trigger a fatal asthma seizure like it always has. But Moran happily shouts back that even when she runs, her chest feels completely clear. She isn't having a seizure at all. Her lifelong illness is officially 100% cured. Overwhelmed with emotion, Moran cries tears of pure joy, turning back to Diabolo and thanking him from the bottom of her heart. Raum, deeply ashamed of how he judged and threatened his master, formally bows and promises to atone for his rudeness by serving Diabolo with his life from now on. Diabolo, being the absolute Chad he is now, just laughs it off, telling Raum not to push himself too hard since he just got over a frozen shoulder. The sheer whiplash of going from an abusive, trash-tier noble to a kind, benevolent lord has Marin absolutely swooning. She tearfully apologizes for ever calling him a useless servant in her head and declares that from today on, he isn't just her master, but the person she admires most in the entire world, vowing to adore him until her very last breath. With his first death flag successfully shattered, Diabolo smiles and says, "All right, because it's time to tackle the hardest boss fight yet." Later that day, he prepares to head out to the Deep Window estate. Both Raum and Moran, now fiercely loyal to him, insist on accompanying him. They pull up to the imposing gates of Ciel's mansion, and just like last time, the gatekeeper immediately blocks their path, angrily telling Diabolo that he has some serious nerve coming back here. But before Diabolo can even try to smooth talk his way in, things go completely sideways. A massive, invisible force suddenly rips through the front yard, completely blasting a massive tree right next to them into splinters. The shockwave knocks everyone off their feet. Diabolo acts purely on his newly grinded instincts, diving and shielding Moran with his own body as the shockwave shatters the ground around them. He looks up in absolute shock and sees Ciel glaring at them from a distance, panting heavily. The terrified gatekeeper explains that this destructive invisible force is the young lady's attributeless magic, angrily asking Diabolo if this helps him understand just how much Ciel utterly despises him. Moran bravely tries to intervene, desperately shouting that Lord Diabolo is seriously here to cure Lady Ciel's legs. But the gatekeeper isn't having it. He furiously scolds Diabolo, yelling that wounding her as he pleases and then deciding to cure her as he pleases is the ultimate insult, asking just how much he intends to toy with the poor girl's heart and body. Diabolo clenches his jaw, completely speechless, because deep down he knows the guard is absolutely right. He might have changed, but to Ciel, he is still the monster who ruined her life, and fixing this is going to take a lot more than just overpowered healing magic. Diabolo is sweating bullets, internally screaming about how things could have possibly escalated to this point again. Just when he thought he had a solid plan to fix things, he's face to face with another massive crisis. High above in the trees, his overpowered lolly master Alcor is watching the whole scene play out, casually munching on some snacks and wondering how her student is going to overcome this massive hurdle. Seeing the utter destruction caused by Ciel's magic, Diabolo quickly regains his composure and genuinely thanks the furious gatekeeper for protecting Moran during the blast. He humbly apologizes, stating that he doesn't want to cause any more trouble, and that he's just glad his maid is safe. This unexpectedly polite response completely catches Ciel's personal maid off guard. She steps out from the estate grounds, staring blankly at the surprisingly respectful Diabolo. Seeing her, Diabolo's gamer brain instantly flashes back to a crucial cutscene from the original RPG. In that flashback, Ciel's parents give her a beautifully crafted, very expensive necklace as a gift to celebrate her political marriage to Diabolo, telling her they'll be happy if she treasures it. But the original scumbag Diabolo, upon seeing the necklace, angrily snatches it from her hands, violently snapping the chain and telling her to shut up and not defy him. When Ciel desperately tries to grab it back, crying that it's precious to her, he literally pushes her off a massive cliff, watching her fall with a wicked smirk while crushing the broken necklace in his hand. Later, he tries to buy his way out of the situation by throwing a massive pile of money at her parents to apologize, a move so heartless it cements him as the ultimate villain. Snapping back to the present, Diabolo realizes that while he can't undo the physical trauma of the fall yet, he might be able to mend the emotional trauma first. In the game, Ciel mentions that the broken necklace was lost somewhere on the back mountain of the Deep Window estate. He figures that if he can find that precious necklace and return it, she might at least give him a chance to speak to her. He quickly turns to Moran and Raum, tells them to wait and help repair the collapsed mansion gates, and insists on going alone. He confidently declares that just healing her injury isn't enough. He has to save both her mind and her body if he truly wants to avoid his execution flag. Moran and Raum enthusiastically agree, but as Diabolo ventures deep into the overgrown, unpaved back mountain, his confidence quickly fades. He's hopelessly lost, surrounded by identical trees, and nervously wondering if a tiny broken necklace from years ago would even still be there. Just as he's about to give up, something catches his eye right near the edge of a massive cliff. It's the necklace. He carefully slides down the steep embankment, cheering that this is a totally classic, game-like lucky development. He grabs the necklace, feeling like an absolute hero, but his victory celebration is cut extremely short. Alcor casually floats down next to him, totally bursting his bubble. She points out that the only reason a shiny, expensive necklace sat here untouched for years isn't luck. It's because this specific area has absolutely no beast trails. And in a fantasy world, a forest with no normal animals usually means one very terrifying thing: an apex predator lives there. Before Diabolo can even process her ominous warning, the ground beneath him violently rumbles. A massive shadow eclipses the sun, and a gigantic, terrifying griffin-like monster crashes through the trees right behind him. As the beast lets out a deafening, blood-curdling screech, Diabolo drops the hero act, bursts into tears, and screams at the top of his lungs, "This time for sure, I'm Diad!" Well, so much for an easy fetch quest. The massive, terrifying griffin swoops down with its sharp claws bared, and Diabolo is instantly forced into panic mode. He scrambles backward, desperately trying to figure out how to escape this feathered nightmare, but then he realizes something even worse. In the chaos, he dropped the precious necklace. To make matters 10 times more stressful, the massive bird lands with a heavy thud, stepping its giant, razor-sharp claw directly on top of the sparkling jewelry. Diabolo is literally shaking like a leaf, crying and wondering why his life always turns into a high-stakes survival horror game at the worst possible moments. Meanwhile, back at the mansion's front gates, Miran is nervously pacing around, biting her nails and wondering if her master is going to be okay all by himself in the dangerous woods. Raum, looking surprisingly wise, gently reassures her, stating that if it's the current Lord Diabolo, he is absolutely certain he will find a way to save Lady Ciel too, because he has already proven to them that even the worst people can change. Inside the estate, Ciel is talking with her personal maid about the lost necklace. Her maid calmly mentions that Ciel's father had strictly forbidden her from going to the back mountain years ago because it was a highly dangerous territory infested with monstrous birds. Ciel suddenly gasps, looking at her maid in shock and asking if she deliberately sent Diabolo up there as a trap, but her maid just gives a chilling, dark-eyed stare. She coldly remarks that if he gets ripped apart by those monster birds, it's just his own fault, stating that there isn't a single person in this mansion who has actually forgiven him, and that the only acceptable apology from a man like him is a life-risking effort. Back on the mountain, Alcor is floating in the air, completely relaxed, and starts backseat gaming. She yells down at Diabolo, telling him that a low-ranking bird like this should be a total cakewalk compared to the massive stone golems he fought during training. She reminds him that in order to reach Darkness Level 10, his body automatically unlocked several high-level offensive spells, so he should stop crying and just blast the thing. But Diabolo is sweating bullets, desperately shaking his head, and screaming back the most embarrassing confession ever, "I don't remember any attack magic." Talk about a classic gamer fail. Our boy literally spent all his skill points on the healing tree and forgot to equip his basic combat spells. The griffin swipes its claws, nearly taking his head off, and Diabolo barely dodges, telling himself that even if his brain can't remember the spells, his muscle memory from Alcor's brutal training has to kick in. He spots an opening, lunges forward, and snatches the necklace off the ground, thinking he can just grab it and run, but Alcor sighs and calls him a fool for turning his back on a territorial predator in its own domain. Sure enough, he turns around only to see the monster's terrifying open beak right in his face. Clenching his fist, he decides he absolutely refuses to get killed by a random wild mob when he's supposed to be saving heroines, so he aims his palm and unleashes his magic. But instead of a dark energy blast, a bright, soothing light erupts, and Diabolo screams in sheer horror as he realizes he accidentally cast Dark Healing and literally just healed the very monster that's trying to eat him. The fully restored bird screeches and charges once again. Realizing he is completely out of excuses, Diabolo forces himself to focus. He remembers Alcor's core lessons. Concentrate the magical flow into his fingertips, channel the pure darkness, and release it all at once. He waits for the absolute perfect opening, dodges a deadly dive, and unleashes a massive, concentrated beam of dark energy directly into the beast's chest, completely blowing it away in a spectacular explosion. Falling to his knees in pure exhaustion, he sighs in relief, praying his master didn't see his incredibly embarrassing healing blunder. But of course, Alcor is floating right above him, cackling her head off because she saw the entire thing. Well, a win is a win, and with the precious necklace finally secured in his hand, our boy is officially ready to face his final boss. Diabolo returns from the dangerous back mountain looking like he survived a war zone covered in deep cuts and caked in mud. Miran completely loses her mind, dramatically promising to execute whatever insolent person dared to touch her precious master, but Diabolo just laughs nervously, claiming he just had a clumsy fall. With a proud grin, he holds up the glittering, fully restored necklace, and Ciel's personal maid is so deeply moved by his survival and dedication that she happily agrees to guide him straight to Ciel's private quarters. Right before they enter, Ciel is throwing a hilarious, adorable temper tantrum, furiously yelling at her cleaning staff for replacing her favorite childhood pillow because she absolutely cannot sleep without it. But the second the double doors swing open and she sees Diabolo standing there, she completely short-circuits from embarrassment, blushing furiously, before quickly trying to glare at him with her usual cold anger. Ciel's maid dramatically tells her to look, and Diabolo steps forward, presenting the glittering necklace in his hand. Ciel's eyes instantly fill with tears as she recognizes the precious heirloom from her mother. Her maid gently explains that Diabolo risked his literal life fighting savage, high-level monsters on the dangerous mountain just to bring it back to her. Seizing the moment, Diablo gets incredibly serious, placing his hand on his chest and begging for the chance to heal her injured legs. Ciel's maid is highly skeptical, stating that the medical world has already declared her legs permanently paralyzed, but Raum and Moran step in as the ultimate hype men. Raum proudly reveals that Diabolo cured Moran's incurable disease, and Moran passionately begs Ciel to believe in the newly reborn Lord. Deeply affected by their loyalty, Ciel looks down and bitterly sighs that it's the leg he selfishly took away, so he can do as he pleases. Moran gets defensive about her master being talked down to, but Diabolo gently holds her back, thanking Ciel for giving him a genuine chance at atonement. He kneels down, concentrates his magical energy, and casts a massive wave of dark healing right on her legs. Immediately, a natural, nostalgic sensation returns to her lower body, and to her maid's absolute shock, Ciel slowly stands up on her own 2 feet. Instead of bragging, Diabolo looks down, his eyes filled with genuine regret, and softly says, "I'm sorry." This simple, heartfelt apology completely breaks Ciel. She realizes that what she wanted all these years wasn't just magic or a returned necklace. She just wanted him to care. Tears stream down her face as she whispers that those few simple words were all it took to heal her soul. Diabolo promises he won't ask for immediate forgiveness, but vows to face her with all his heart from now on, hoping she can acknowledge him someday. Deeply moved, Ciel gently holds his hands, smiles beautifully with the necklace around her neck, and asks if they can start over and walk together from the very beginning, to which Diabolo happily agrees. Later, as they prepare to head back home, Ciel's maid bids them a safe journey. But as they walk to the carriage, Moran happily clings onto Diabolo's arm, praising him for being the amazing Chad she knew he was. Diabolo completely panics, screaming at Raum to get his daughter off him, but Raum just laughs proudly like a supportive father-in-law. Up in the estate window, Ciel watches them with her face pressed against the glass, looking incredibly grumpy and jealous, furiously demanding to know what Moran's relationship is with her fiancé. This marks the official end of our prologue, but for our reborn villain, his chaotic, waifu-filled, life-saving adventure is only just getting started.